Hey everybody, it's Donovan with the Music Retail Podcast. I want to thank you for being here today and for watching today's episode. I think you're going to really enjoy it. You know, my goal with the Music Retail Podcast is to interview people that are interesting, that have something to give and to share, that can help you build a better business. In order to make sure you receive future updates, please like and subscribe. That not only will keep you in the loop for things as they come up, but it also helps the YouTube algorithm to know that people actually like this content and will share it around. Okay, let's get to the interview.
So this is really exciting. Joel, I've got to tell you, ever since I've had the idea for this podcast, I had made a list of the people that I wanted to talk to. You were one of the first people on that list. You are just such a sharp guy and have been so giving with your time and wisdom and knowledge through NASMD and NAM. And so I'm really excited today to get to talk to you. So Joel, you are the president and owner, I believe, right, of Menchey Music, based out of Pennsylvania. You guys have 8 stores plus an operations center all throughout Pennsylvania and Maryland, and then 8 affiliate stores. Did I get that right?
Yes, I believe we have 8 affiliates. The number has changed a little bit, but yes.
Let's say roughly 8. Yeah. I mean, that's quite an empire to manage and to handle. Give me an idea of like when the business was started and by whom, how you came into it, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, first of all, Donovan, thank you for your kind words and for the opportunity to do this. I've actually listened to a lot of these podcasts recently, because of the lockdown. I've had a lot of time to walk and run, and these hour-and-a-half bites of time really fit into my schedule nicely. So I've heard some great ones in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So thank you for providing that content.
Oh, yeah.
The business was started by my grandfather in 1936, and he, I think the story's on the website, bought a saxophone at a yard sale and put some work into it and sold it for a profit. And he did this from his mother's kitchen. And with that profit, I don't know what it was, he bought sheet music and reeds, and that's essentially how the business started. And he ran it with a growing leadership team, moved stores a couple times, and ended up retiring in 1982, which was, at the time, he had then basically turned it over to his management team. And there were probably, at the time, 7 or 8 people. That group ultimately grew to about 12 in the early 90s who were running the business. So he had been retired for a long time. I got involved through a pretty unconventional way. When I was a guitar player in high school, so I always liked having access to the business. Cheap guitars really, were neat. And I always thought, well, maybe there's a possibility that I would get involved in the business. I graduated from college in 1990 and actually applied for a job there and was turned down. He wasn't involved, so I asked one of the members of the management team who was running it for a job, and they didn't have anything available. It was a smaller company then. They had very few positions that they felt I'd be interested in, and they suggested that I find something else and maybe come back in a few years. So I did that. I got a job as a financial analyst at a large manufacturing media interest that's no longer around, called Susquehanna Falsgraf. And it was 1990, and it was a tough time to try to find a job. There was a recession, and as I was joining this company, it was in July of 1990, they had just finished their first round of layoffs that week. And then the following week, following month, there was a second round of layoffs. Good. So I had no idea why they even wanted me to start the job, but they did. But I was concerned that I was going to lose my job, and it was a tough market. It was my first job. So I kept at it. And full disclosure, I was in way over my head. It was a job that I probably was not adequately prepared for. And I was pretty bad, but I stuck it out because I knew if I lost my job, either through a layoff or otherwise, that it would be really tough to find another opportunity like this. And it was a great opportunity. So I did that. Made it through the first. There were no more rounds of layoffs, and in 1993, I started playing my guitar out in clubs and really getting active in the music scene. And again, started to become reacquainted with the music store. And it was, I had a close contact there. His name was Evan Prythurch. He was our store manager in our local store. There were 2 stores. And he really helped me out in terms of getting gear and finding the right things for me to use when I performed, et cetera. So he was really a mentor. And in 1993, he called me. 1993, he called me and told me he resigned. And my first reaction was, "Oh no, I've lost my gear connection. I better, hurry up and buy everything that's on my list." Yeah. And he assured me that's not the reason he was calling. He said that there was no succession plan for the business, and he thought, he knew I was interested in business, and I obviously was interested in music. He said, if you ever had an interest in taking over this company, now would be the time. So at the time, my grandfather, I learned, was only about a 50% shareholder in the business. He had sold the remaining 50% to all these other members of his management team. So having worked as a financial analyst, one of the things I learned was how to put a business plan together and go to a bank. So I did that. It took about 1.5 years, and ultimately I was able to buy my grandfather and the other, I think it was 10 or 11 shareholders out, and buy the business. And I've never looked back.
And was that in 93? Is that what you said?
It took me 1.5 years. So I believe I took over March 15th of 1995.
That's awesome. So 25 years then of you being in the business, how has your business changed in the last 25 years since you've been involved?
So when I bought the business in 95, we were 2 stores and very focused on school music. And we've grown to be 8 stores plus an operations center. And during that 25-year period, we expanded into combo and pianos and church organs, and now we're back to where we started. We pretty much school music. We do still sell a fairly significant amount of print music. We are more in the piano business than we were in 95, but really our roots are school music, and it kind of took 20 to 25 years to figure out that's really what our core competency was.
Right. What got you into the piano side of the business?
I'm not sure. It was back in the late 90s when the piano business really was, I guess the mid 90s were the heyday of the piano business. And I kept reading in the trades about all these people that I admired and respected who were, just setting the world on fire with pianos, and wanted to be in that business. They're large ticket sales. And so we hired someone who knew the business, and for a couple of years, it kept going and it took off. And it really helped to be in the band and orchestra business while we were, working through the 2008, 2009 recession in the piano business. Because while a lot of dealers lost access to capital who were piano only, we still had recurring revenue from our school music business to sustain us. So that really helped. And we were fortunate to weather that storm. But it really, that business ran its course. We were very heavy in the institution, the pianos, the college sales, as well as the institutional business. And we came to the conclusion in 2014, 2015 that we weren't able to, we needed to get back to basics and really focus primarily on our school music business. We're still in pianos. Pianos contribute probably 8 to 10% of our revenues, but and particularly digitals, but we are back to our roots of school music.
Gotcha. So with school music, of course, in Pennsylvania and that whole kind of East Coast area, there is a lot of really strong school music dealers. And in your state specifically, there's several. Matter of fact, I have interviewed a couple for this podcast already.
You have.
And good business people too. Like, they're smart guys, good people. Like, I'm sure it's a very competitive landscape. Your approach has been a little bit different than what some have done. When we think of some of the places in our industry like Amro or Pages Music, where they've just kind of created a single big location and then just send people out everywhere, you're using a model built on brick and mortar retail. And, with 8 stores and somewhere around 8 affiliates, tell me why you chose that route and why you feel like that gives you an edge.
So, interesting observation. When I got into the business, we were much more like the Amros or the Pages, with one store and a very an ed rep territory that was probably an hour to an hour and a half radius around our headquarters. What we realized was, in order to grow geographically in Pennsylvania, because there are a lot of competitors, we had to build bricks and mortar stores. So we looked to the south and compared our model to the largest school music dealer in the country, Music and Arts. They had a lot of small stores, and that was their model. At the time, now they've gotten a lot better at this, but at the time, they did not have a strong school service component of their business, and we did. So we felt that was the school service component was our edge, and the stores were theirs, and we had to really develop that store, multiple store format. What we did incorrectly was we opened stores that were too large initially, and it took us about 6 or 7 years to realize that trying to be everything to everyone and do our best to replicate the sort of the home-based store that people always knew about was not the best approach financially. What's interesting is that as we had one big store and a small branch store in '95, and then we opened a second branch store, so we had 3 total. And as we kept growing and our territory expanded, people compared our small stores less to the big store, if that makes sense. So our identity was more around the small stores than the large store. And in 2015, 2016, we started to realize more people know us as a small format retailer. So that was really what solidified our decision to abandon the large store format altogether and centralize all of our operations in the operations center.
Interesting. So when the original stores that were larger stores, what size square footage are we talking about?
So our original Hanover, PA store, which is where our headquarters is, was 17,000 square feet. Our version 1 of our branch stores were between 7,000 and 9,000 square feet. And now we won't open a store that's over 3,000 square feet. And we have since reduced the footprints of those larger format stores to be smaller format. The only exceptions where we have acoustic pianos will obviously build larger, slightly larger footprints, but for the most part, our stores are between 2,100 and 5,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Our So we have 4 stores and an operations center as well. And 3 of our 4 stores, actually all of our stores up until earlier this year were, around 8,000 to 9,500 square feet, right around there. And but then we moved our store in Kansas City to a nicer shopping center and went from about 7,000 square feet down to 4,000 square feet. And really trying to get it to be, instead of big selection, but just smaller, more concentrated, and but still trying to really provide something unique that's not being done there. We tried a really small format store in Lawrence, Kansas, which is the home of University of Kansas, and that only made it about a year. We'd had many conversations with the district there to kind of figure out what our place and presence would be, and we explained to them how we operate. And after we opened, we discovered that they provided all the instruments to the kids for band and orchestra for free. And I didn't ask that because I didn't know to ask that at the time. And when it was me telling him, like, well, we make a living by renting instruments and stuff, I would figure if there would have been a conflict to that, they would have said, oh, well, that might be hard since we give everything away for free. And lesson learned on that one. So I'll definitely ask that going forward. But it's interesting that you've kind of found that strategy or that mindset of trying to move smaller. How far away are your stores from your main location, from the operations center?
End to end. Well, it really is an end to end. The farthest store away is probably 2+ hours.
Gotcha.
But each store is between 30 and 45 minutes away from the next store.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's, mainly our stores are still kind of a bit larger, but our stores are also, 3 hours away from each other on average. And we're in major markets. So St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, and Joplin, and those are all, 3 to 4 hours away from each other. Springfield and Joplin are an hour away, a little over an hour away. But outside of that, they're quite a bit distant. So, we were thinking if we went in with small stores like in St. Louis, then nobody would know who we are, because a small 3,000 square foot music. Now, if we were just focused on band service or something, that might be different. But like you, we've had a love for gear from the beginning, and you've grown out of that, but I haven't yet. So
well, I still have some of it behind me. You can probably see it in the camera hanging on the wall. That's an interesting observation, that because you're in bigger stores, or bigger markets, you have bigger stores. What we've found is the smaller the market, the bigger the store, because we want to be relevant in that smaller market. So we actually offer more in the smaller market, more lesson studios, perhaps the pianos. It's what we found is in the larger markets where there's a ton of competition, we can actually open a smaller, more focused location and just pick off that piece of the business.
Are you working primarily on being a niched and then also just convenience? Where it's maybe that you're pulling the people that are within a radius of your store?
Yes.
Yeah. That's kind of where I see, our future growth coming from as well. Both in St. Louis and Kansas City, I could see, in the coming years, smaller locations throughout the area because they're such large markets, and, people don't like, Kansas City is a great example. It's a city that crosses two states, and, you've got essentially equal populations on both sides, but people don't often cross the state line to go shopping, even though when you do, you don't even recognize, well, there's a road called State Line Road. But I mean, it's like, it's an easy thing to do, but people tend to stay in their neighborhood more or less. Hell, even in Springfield, which is not that big, the other day, my wife and I were driving on the other side of town, and we were commenting like, gosh, we haven't been over here in forever. There was restaurants and new stuff, things we had never seen before, because like we never go over there. So I think customers tend to become creatures of habit. So smaller focused stores, especially like a band shop, in markets. Have you positioned those stores maybe also in areas, I don't know if Pennsylvania is one of those states, like we see this a lot in Kansas and St. Louis, Kansas City and St. Louis, that we can't do rental displays. And so they just send parents out to local stores to shop. Is Pennsylvania like that as well, or are you still predominantly doing displays?
It's funny. What you just described is what we see in Maryland. With the exception of Baltimore County, Maryland, where there's a very unique school bid situation, all of Maryland is send out. So unless you have a store, and this is where we have some very strong affiliates, unless you have a store, you don't get any rental business. Whereas in Pennsylvania, it's much more of the traditional ed rep working with the educator. So that we rely much more on that relationship in Pennsylvania than we do in the Maryland market, with the exception of Baltimore County.
Gotcha. Interesting. So when looking to open a store now, what are some of the things that you look for, both in towns or cities you open in, maybe surrounding kind of, statistics for population? What do you look for when you open a new store?
Well, assuming you're referring to opening an organic store, we would look for, a large school, vibrant school system. Our most recent organic store opening was in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, which is close to Annapolis, and there are strong demographics down there, very strong music program, and really the question was, which end of the county do we want to be on? And we chose an area that wasn't real close to any of our competitors, and that became our niche. If it's not an organic store, it's really about the viability of the market where, say we're buying a competitor. If there's a competitor with a strong market position in a market, we'll look at that. But there really aren't that many of them around anymore.
Mm-hmm. Probably going to be fewer still once this COVID thing ends. So of the 8 locations you have, how many of those were opened from scratch versus how many were acquired?
6 have been organic and 2 have been through acquisitions.
Interesting. So tell me about that. Do you have a preference for which one you prefer doing?
Definitely the acquisition. For a variety of reasons. When you particularly in a tertiary market, when you buy a competitor, I mean there's clearly goodwill associated with that competitor. I mean, they've been around for a while, particularly in the school music market. So acquisitions make a lot of sense in a tertiary market. In a primary market, it's a little easier to do that, just because you're hoping to take a reasonable slice of a fairly large pie anyway. But in the tertiary markets, it makes a lot more sense to acquire, and theoretically you're helping out a competitor who's probably looking to exit the business. We've done that several times, and there's a much quicker payback on an acquisition.
I was talking with someone, one of the recent podcast interviews, and they were saying after 17 years, one of the locations they opened had finally started to really perform and do well, and versus, this is one they had opened from scratch versus acquisitions. And to me, that's the fear and hardship of opening something. There's all kinds of lessons to be learned, and there's only one way to learn them, which is basically the hard way. And the only time we opened anything from scratch was the location in Lawrence, which made it just a hair over 12 months. And whereas through acquisition, it just seems to be so many benefits. Obviously you get a customer base. You usually get some knowledge about the area that you're going into. Sometimes the knowledge isn't always that great, but you still get it. Sometimes you can get some favorable pricing on inventory and purchase, you eliminate a competitor, you do some good by helping someone move on to something new. There's just so many advantages, but you're right, there's not a lot of opportunities for quality acquisitions, especially if you have it in your mindset that you want to be in a specific spot.
The biggest challenge in the with the acquisitions, and you probably know this, is meshing your corporate cultures, and that's what we found in the several times that we've acquired businesses. Is some people welcome the change and then come over, and our most recent acquisition, we acquired some. We brought some associates on who have been great, but there are some who just don't want to change, and that creates a conflict.
Yeah.
Other than that, acquisitions are strongly preferred.
Well, that's a great topic. How would you describe the culture in your business?
We started out as school music. We tried all sorts of different things. Now we're really back to our roots. Our goal is to make our stores as mom-friendly as possible. We've identified the customer as mom. The student is really the customer, but because mom's writing the check,
right,
that mom is our customer, and we do everything we can to maintain that friendly culture to accommodate the parents, and that starts with hiring the right people. As much as I like hanging out with rock star wannabes and rock and roll shops, they probably aren't the best people to show a mom the difference between a clarinet and a saxophone. But so we hire a lot of people who have band and orchestra backgrounds, and they're able to get the message across much easier. Of course, our storefronts reflect that culture as well. Again, they're smaller. They have a lot of lessons. The teachers we hire are very mom friendly, so it's all part of the formula.
Yeah, you mentioned you hire lots of band folks. I've found that to be challenging to find. Where are you finding these band people?
That's a great question. We have an application on our website that is really our primary source, and a lot of times, particularly at the retail level, we hire part-timers who very quickly become full-timers, and sometimes very quickly become senior full-timers, store managers, lesson coordinators, etc. And that, it does. There certainly can be more turnover, but what happens is once they get to that full-time level, we don't see the level of turnover as much, so it's a great way to grow our own. And one of the members of our leadership team is a former music and arts regional rep, and this was the world she lived in. She was constantly hiring people, so when we hired her, we just inherited that formula, and she's been very effective at finding people and moving them into positions, and it's great. She now, it's a lot easier to do when you have 8 similarly sized retail stores. She's always looking, where are the holes to fill, and,
right.
And with because we're all 30 to 45 minutes apart, she can do that pretty easily. And we actually have some temps who may be part-time in one store and part-time in another, not temps, part-time employees who are part-time in one store, part-time in another, and she's created full-time positions for them to float. And again, that just allows them to become part of the permanent fabric of our culture.
You mentioned that you often start them as part-timers. Does that mean that these are often younger? Like how young will these people be that you hire?
College age, sometimes in college when we hire them. In fact, I believe our most tenured store manager right now started as a part-time high school employee, went to college, and now is running one of our largest stores.
Interesting. How do you work out that college schedule while also trying to be in retail? Here, it seems like our college music students have ensembles all afternoon.
Well, they're typically part-time when they're working and going to school.
Right.
We figure it out, and it could be a very part-time schedule. I think we find them when they're in that environment, and if we like them and they graduate and they have an interest in working for us full time, they can move in and join the team.
Gotcha.
To be full disclosure, our Gail, who runs our retail stores, could probably answer that question much better than me.
You know, she's going to listen to this and just cringe, be like, that's not at all.
That's what I'm afraid of.
The man has no idea what I do. Interesting. Okay. And so very family friendly, mom friendly, catered business, and looking for people that kind of, you know, really grew up in that world as well,
Yes.
to represent your brand. I mean, that's
Yes.
kind of it in a nutshell.
Yes.
So tell me, when you're looking, you've decided to also grow your business through affiliates. You mentioned that's a lot of that's in Maryland because of the, you know, you don't have a store there, you're not renting. I've heard you say before that, like, you know, picking affiliates isn't that the easiest of things. And you've tried a lot of things too. You've tried different types of places, different types of affiliates, and had more success with some than others. So in your experience now, what makes for a good affiliate and what makes for a bad affiliate?
First of all, I'm glad you were paying
for
attention.
Menchey Music.
Yes. I'm glad you were paying attention in my NASMD session.
Always.
So we have had reasonable success with our affiliates recently, although we haven't aggressively tried to acquire new affiliates. But, you know, the philosophy always was find like-minded dealers who, in their respective markets, represent themselves the way we would represent ourselves in any of our markets. And that's the secret. If we have to sell them on the idea, it almost makes it work better because they weren't looking for the quick buck. You know, the model behind the affiliates is they rent our instruments on consignment, and we pay them a commission to rent those. And there was a time when we were getting more calls than we were placing outbound for these affiliate relationships because they wanted the opportunity to bring in traffic and obviously generate an additional income stream, but they didn't want to do the 12-month work that's required to maintain those relationships. So that's really the secret to finding the right affiliates. We have lost through either our decision or theirs or going out of business, probably twice as many, 2 to 3 times as many affiliates as we currently have. Just for a variety of reasons. We had one where it was a great affiliate who represented a market where we didn't have a store, and then we opened a store right down the street, and it just worked out that way, and we both agreed it was for the best that we sever the relationship. That was a friendly parting. We had another affiliate where we got the affiliate started with the paperwork and educated her, and then found out that she was copying our contracts and buying inventory, substandard inventory, and renting on her own. And we couldn't figure out why her volume dropped all of a sudden. And as soon as we realized what was happening, we pulled the plug. Fortunately, those situations are pretty isolated. The affiliates we have now are all pretty good, pretty committed to our program. We have some affiliates that represent their brand and serve their customers as well, if not better, than some of our branch stores. And those are the ones you want to keep.
Yeah.
And I can say that the first affiliate we ever had was in Frederick, Maryland. They actually introduced us to the affiliate model. And when I did a training down there about 10 years ago, and their level of organization was so superior in the presentation that they made to their staff to represent our products was just so impressive. So they've definitely, they've for 25 years have been one of our best affiliate relationships.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. What are some of the nuts and bolts of managing that affiliate relationship? Because I would imagine that it can be tricky. On the surface, it looks like, oh, you go drop some contracts off and some instruments, and then they just send you the money after that, and it's a piece of cake. But I know it's not quite that easy.
It's not. And again, I'm stepping out of my lane a little bit here, but years ago, when I did do most of the hands-on work with the affiliates, it was the training. The initial training. Going through the testing to have them, prepare the contracts correctly and, fill out the paperwork, et cetera. And since that process has now been delegated to somebody else, it's greatly improved. And we now do a video tutorial. We have controls in place for, reconciling the money that's sent through to, through the ed reps. It's much tighter now, but it's not easy. And yes, there are some affiliates who just do not appreciate the need for the paperwork.
Yeah,
that's probably why they're not. It shows, and you can tell.
Yeah, exactly. So describe to me a little bit about what your personal day-to-day looks like. What kind of stuff do you generally work on? And maybe also what kind of stuff are you working on right now with all of the COVID stuff?
So I typically wake up pretty early. My ideal day, in fact, since we've been closed down, excuse me, this has been an ideal work environment for me personally. I wouldn't say it's the same for the staff, but I like to wake up early, knock out about 3 or 4 hours of work while my mind's still sharp, and then typically work out and then go put in another 5 or 6 hours with meetings, calls, managing staff, et cetera. I do a lot of work with the financials, but in the last 5 or 6 years, I've spent a lot of my time really developing our leadership team. And that's really what I spend the second half of my day doing. What we're working on right now, we took this opportunity to catch up on some projects that, frankly, we could do much easier without, the constant activity of 8 stores being open. The first thing we jumped on, and we were going to do this anyway, but when we decided to close down, we're an AMSI customer, and we converted to version 12. Within a week and a half of closing down.
Wow.
We knew we were going to do it, but we did it. And frankly, it's been a dream to do it in this environment because while we're one of the early adopters for converting, for a fairly large school music dealer, it's given us a lot. They've given us a lot of attention and fixed a lot of issues that we had. And it's been a great partnership to work through these issues during this time. And I think it would have been a lot more complicated had we done it during a regular busy time. Along with that, we started to build out our loyalty program. We are, looking at all kinds of things like our lesson program. We launched our online store right before this happened. So we're spending a lot of time adding product, perfecting the store, et cetera. So it's been a great time to catch up on projects, although we are looking very forward to getting back to business and our regular work.
I bet. Your website really looks great. You've got a bunch of great information. You've got a bunch of COVID blog updates about what you guys are doing, how you're sterilizing instrument. What platform are you using to host all the content management for the site?
So we're an AMSI user, and we use Vortex for both our online rentals and our online store. We also have, and that web address is shopmenchey.com. We also use a WordPress platform, which is much more SEO friendly for the static part of the website. And if you toggle back and forth, you can see that the sites look identical.
Yeah. I figured. I mean, I couldn't tell what the front end was, but once I clicked over into the shop side, I recognized it.
Mm-hmm. The topics look the same. They're named the same exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, definitely the front. I mean, the shop site looks good too, but the front end site is really, really impressive. I mean, you have a lot of content there. Service maps. You have connections to your people, obviously your locations, the products and services that you offer. I mean, you can tell there's a lot of effort and a lot of work that went into building out what's a pretty robust and attractive site.
Well, I'm happy to say I can't take credit for that. Actually, two of the people on our leadership team, Amy, our general manager, and Gail, spent a lot of time really trying to find the best of the best to put that together. They did that about a year ago.
Well, they did a great job. They really did. On the V12 upgrade, that's an interesting thing as well. We have tried to do that multiple times, but with too many problems, and the upgrade process always ends up getting canceled. Now it's at the point that our people don't even really want to do it. What were some of the reasons that you upgraded to V12, and what are some of the advantages that you are expecting to see?
So, great question. We realized almost as soon as we launched our online store that the version 11 architecture didn't support a lot of the bells and whistles we needed in version 12, with version 12. So, and the flexibility, particularly the addition of the API that they've integrated with version 12, just gives us tools to do other things. There's an attribute function in version 12 that really makes the browsing experience much more effective in version 12. Not to mention, it's a much more stable platform in version 12. And I won't lie, the conversion process took a while, but that should be understandable. They're going from one completely different platform to another. Mm-hmm. And again, we muscled through it and are glad we're where we are. But we look forward to others like you converting, and because I think there's a lot we can gain as an industry from having, all the people who have grown comfortable with version 11 moving over to that platform, because there are some really great advantages to it.
Somehow they've taken a program that's always been a little slow and ugly. They've made it slower and uglier, and which boggles my mind that that they've been able to pull that off. And at least, again, this is our testing of it as we've done these conversions. But things that used to take, a few seconds, which always even seemed a little long, then now can take 30 or 40 seconds. And when you're waiting for something with a customer standing in front of you, even if it's 10 or 15 seconds, it could be awkward as you just sit there, especially in today's world where things are almost instant.
I agree, and actually that's one of the things that we're working with them on. It's funny that it's not that the entire program's slow. It's just there are certain parts of it that are slow. Yes. And we've asked our team to make lists of the slow parts of the program, and then we visit with them, and they'll drill right into our SQL database while we're on the phone with them. We can see what they're doing. They'll do a remote desktop session, and they can identify the source of the problem. So again, I think if more of us did this, I think we'd find these problems quicker. And I'm pretty happy. I've been a huge supporter. We've been on TriTech since 1995, and they've been a great partner. Have really, they've done some really cool customization for us, which has really helped our business, particularly on the online rental module, But we firmly believe that if we wanted to get everything we could get out of that program, we needed to bite the bullet and make the conversion and do it right. And it's an investment. It's an investment in time. We did invest in a pretty robust SQL Server because we didn't want that to be the source of the problem. So we have definitely eliminated that variable from the formula.
Yeah, I think I want to be a fan. I would say I do think it's the best point of sale system for those in our industry that are in school music service, and especially if you're doing school music and repair and rentals and retail. It's the most comprehensive program, and it's the best program available. That doesn't mean it's particularly good, though. And there's parts of it that are good, but there's parts of it that are infuriatingly frustrating. And their partnership with Vortex, some of the way they've handled sort of the credit card processing. There's a lot of things that have been locked down that shouldn't be. And we have the same, or we believe that in version 12 we're going to have a few more options with some of this web processing, with it being a SQL database, that we may not be tied to just one provider anymore. And I'm hoping that creates some competition and allows us, because if you're trying to do serious e-commerce, serious may be the wrong word, because I don't mean like serious as in like a bestbuy.com or something like that. But if you're trying to do it at a quality level, using that ASP.NET storefront is not really the best way to do this. And
so I hear you, and we've had those conversations. At the same time, we've seen some of our competitors' sites that use it, and they've used third-party tools that have really enhanced the experience. One thing that we learned in 2000, we actually had an online store with, I want to say, 50,000 print music titles. Don't ask me why I thought that was important at the time, but we had a very robust site that in 2000, 2001 that almost bankrupted us because it had no linkage to our point of sale system. And I vowed that we would never do this again unless we could have a seamless bricks to clicks environment. And while I do think that version 12 does offer the flexibility to use third-party providers, there's something to be said for having those profiles, mirroring those profiles on both the bricks and mortar side as well as the online experience. One of the things that they've recently added in version 12, which is just phenomenal, is you can set it up, you can change a system variable so that every time you add a new customer in your store, they automatically get login credentials to become an active e-customer, which is, I think, what we really want in the school music business. We want our school music customers to buy from us. And I think we don't make it as easy for them, or we haven't been able to make it as easy for them as we could have. And this is certainly a step to do that.
Yeah. So there's definitely some strengths to it, but there's been a lot of frustrations, and the upgrade process to version 12, that's been happening now for a year and a half or 2 years, and it's been slow going, and I think it probably could have been handled better. The service that you're getting now is really what should have been offered from the very beginning, because we have a very, very knowledgeable IT person. He's been excellent, and he struggled with getting this upgrade to happen. I couldn't imagine what it would be like for your average school music company that doesn't have a dedicated IT person. Well,
we don't. I'm just sort of a propeller head, apparently. But you're right. You do need that. I think what would really help is if they had a conversion liaison who could basically lay out the steps and explain, here's what you need from a hardware perspective. Here's how you. And I think there's I think an important step to make this happen will be to have some more concrete, structured handholding to get to the other side. You're right, but And if they could do that, I think that would really help the process. It would shorten the timelines for people like you who have tried this and haven't been able to effectively cross the bridge.
Yeah. So we'll let TriTech off the hook for now. Thinking ahead to the fall, obviously for those of us that are heavy in the school music industry, we're sitting in this time frame right now where we kind of don't know what's going on. We went to spring break hearing about the beginnings of this whole coronavirus thing, and then ended up not coming back to school. And now our state board of education is has recommended canceling all band and ensembles for next school year, or lengthening the school day, or finding some way to have smaller classes. I've chosen not to worry about it right now because nobody knows what they're doing. And so I'm just like, I'm not going to stress out about it. But certainly if they decide to cancel band, that's going to be a problem for us and other school music dealers. So what's your prognostications for the fall, and what are you guys doing to prepare for it? Because as you know, we've got to order inventory. If you haven't already, you've already ordered some. You're probably still ordering inventory now. We can't just call up Eastman or Yamaha or whatever and order 100 trumpets in August 1st and get them August 10th. This has to happen now. So what are you guys expecting for the fall, and how are you preparing for it?
So fortunately or unfortunately, we have almost all of our inventory in-house. And as you know, a clarinet doesn't change a lot from year to year. So, whatever we don't use this year, we'll use next year or the year after. And fortunately, we can absorb that for a year or two. So the inventory part's not the issue. I think the recruitment challenge is going to be the issue. And I don't know how proactive you are in testing students, probably more than we are. That, I think, for whatever reason, we aren't as active across the board in the testing process. Our teachers do a lot of that. There are some districts where we do, but that's the part that I think will be the bottleneck for recruiting. And I suspect there will be a lot of creativity going into how teachers will test and work closely with their school music dealers to find the right instruments for the students. Just from a recruiting standpoint, or just from a band standpoint, I mean, what you just said about your state board considering canceling band and orchestra, I think we didn't hear any of that up until about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Then we started to hear it. Now I think the pendulum's starting to swing back the other way. A lot of people are starting to say closing schools next year would be a huge mistake, not just because they're worried about the school band and orchestra dealers. I think it's the child care issue has really become a problem in this country. And fortunately, we know a lot more about this disease than we did 8 weeks ago. And we have statistics, and we certainly have learned how to social distance and all those, and clean our desks and whatnot. So it sounds as if schools will probably reopen in some fashion with appropriate social distancing. I don't know how that impacts band programs. I suspect for the first year that we go back, ensembles will be a problem. And I'm not sure what will happen with those. But we're assuming that there will be, all things being equal, we will not have as wonderful a back to school season as we've had for the last 80 some years. But it's fortunately because of the built-in music education mechanism that works in the public school systems. We'll have a couple bumps here and there, but I think long term it's still a very viable model. And I do think that particularly in light of people being cooped up in their homes for the last 8 or 9 weeks, there's a lot of interest in finding activities for kids. And I don't know if you've noticed this with your lesson traffic. I've been surprised. We haven't lost as many students as I would have thought. In fact, we've actually gotten a few students here and there during this downturn.
Yeah, we've lost more than we've gotten, but we projected losing up to 50%, and it hasn't been that bad. And so it's been bad though.
Yes.
I'm not gonna. Honestly, the retail sales have been better than I expected. That was the one that caught me by surprise. The cuts to the lesson program weren't as bad as we thought. The rental income has held in okay. Retail. Now we're also comparing this to the same time period last year, and for whatever reason, in the first quarter of 2019, we just crapped the bed, and so this whole COVID stuff, we're actually like comping up to what we did last year. Go figure. It just tells you how bad last year was. Yeah. Well, I do think you're right. I think ultimately at some point people are going to be like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Like kids got to go to school. The reality is not for any lack of trying on our teachers' part, because I think our teachers are doing everything they can. My wife's a middle school band director, and
That's right.
I know that every day she's trying to do something to help those kids. But damn it, the quality education these kids get right now, it sucks. My kids aren't learning jack squat. They're doing the bare minimum. And, they just have no interest or engagement or desire with it. And this can't go on for another year, I tend to not be one of those people that just thinks like, well, we can't ruin the economy. I'm willing to take precautions and stuff, but it's starting to get to a point where it's like, I don't know. It's time to, we've got to get kids back in school. We've got to have some semblance of a life, going here before too long. So.
Well, I agree with you that we can't destroy the economy. And that, I think we're on the same sheet of music there. You have to remember too that there was not a lot of warning before all this happened. So almost overnight, school districts had to find alternate ways of educating these kids. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there was that lack of preparation. There was this hodgepodge of online tools and no warning, no ability to send the kids home with instructions. It just happened. I'd like to think that with the experience we've gained over the last 8 or 9 weeks and a full summer to prepare, that if we go back to school, even in some sort of hybrid format, we'll be a lot more prepared to deal with any kind of online component.
I think that you're right, only because the passion and creativity of our educators basically knows no limits. And I'm not just saying that to like kiss-ass music educators, because as far as I know, none of them listen to this podcast. But those folks are super creative and super resourceful, and they care deeply about it. And I am comfortable putting my future in their hands because they're going to find a way. That being said, I'm not sure that the experience is still going to be what we're accustomed to. And but I think they'll find a way to make it survivable. But it's just not going to be. Band just isn't the same if you're not sitting there with 60 of your closest friends making music together. That's band. So, and orchestra. Orchestra maybe has 40 kids. Well, just, for what it's worth, and I hope there's no manufacturers listening, but what we've decided is we're going to go ahead and stock up and get all of our inventory we need for the fall. And if we can't pay for it, we can't pay for it.
Well, actually, we've already paid for ours. So that check was in the mail before this started.
Oh, my gosh. You might regret that now. You might be like, I wish I had the cash back. Oh, goodness. So, shifting gears a little bit, we were talking about kind of the fall and stuff like that. Kind of real quickly about our music industry, I kind of like to get everyone's pulse on this. Tell me some of the things that you think are right with the music industry. You're super involved in it. You've been involved in NASMD, NAMM. I think you're also an AIM dealer. Are you an AIM dealer as well?
Yes.
So, right. So you're super plugged in with all this stuff. Tell me some of the things that you think are the best parts of our industry.
You know, I was sort of in an industry. I was on the fringes of an industry before I got in the music industry. Um, but what strikes me every year, and what I'm reminded of every year, is the level of passion and creativity that we have in this business. Um, one of the esteemed organizations that you did not mention, Donovan, was the band that I play in every year. It's at
Oh
Winter
my
Bend.
gosh. Yeah.
Prince,
Prince, of course.
the band formerly known as the Retail Print Music Dealers Association House Band. Um, but every year when I play, I have the opportunity to play for what seems like hundreds of thousands of people, but it's probably only a lobby full of people at the Hilton. Um, is the passion and how much. I mean, how many other people, how many other industries can say that they can have that much fun and work with those types of like-minded people, you know, during the day on the show floor and at night. I mean, it's the greatest, and I think that that passion leads to creativity in product development.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
I think that's probably one of the reasons this industry hasn't consolidated as fast as so many other industries, because there are so many people who are so tenacious and so passionate about what they do. It's just limited the amount of consolidation, which is
Yeah.
why NAM has had such a vibrant membership for as many years as it has.
Well, and NAM has been such an important part of the health of our industry, kind of bringing us together and through education and all the things that they're doing. Like, I'm a huge NAM fan, bigger NAM fan than I am a Tri-Technical System, same as you can. But yeah, I love those guys. All right, so then let's shift to the other side of it. What are the things about our industry that are not great?
So I've listened to a couple of your other candidates in these podcasts, and there have been some great suggestions for opportunities to fix broken parts of our industry. So they've used up most of the things on my list, but one thing that always confused me, and maybe this has gotten better, I do think it's gotten better with some vendors, but for years there has always been this emphasis on the opening order or the annual buy-in of product. And this was really prevalent in the combo business, and it still is to some extent in the piano world. And I could never understand that, because our customers don't come rushing in on February 20th and buy the entire stock of pianos that we just bought, or all the guitars that we just bought. They buy them on a regular basis. So what's always frustrated me is the challenge we've had. The focus has always been on the buy and not on inventory management, which is how we've run our business since probably day one. Instead of having an open to buy, we maintain a model inventory. And when we sell one, we buy one. And unfortunately, with a lot of our specialized manufacturing partners, they don't work that way. They can't. It's gotten better, but they can't fulfill the product orders as quickly as we sell them. They would prefer to sell larger orders, and I understand that there are certainly efficiencies when you place larger orders, but that's not how our customers buy them.
Right.
So with the technology that's available and the inventory management metrics that are available, I really think that we could become a much more efficient operation if we would just find a way to link our point of sale systems, which theoretically track our inventory, to the manufacturer, to the supply chain. And I know NAM has really tried to create this linkage, and Dan Kessler at NAM has spent a lot of time trying to develop this standard, and I applaud him for that. But we're just not there yet. And I think once we get there and everybody's on board, we could have a much more efficient inventory management mechanism in our industry.
Yeah, there's some of those things that are available now that are not not automated and not super efficient, but I know like with Fender, they've got a program where we can send them our inventory list, and then when customers look for it online, they will then direct them to us. And with Fender in particular, they've kind of gone from one of my worst to first vendor lists because, a few years ago, we were a big Fender dealer, but we were on the verge of cutting them loose, and just because they were really difficult to deal with, and they honestly, there's no other better way to put it. They were just kind of assholes, and very self-righteous, and just they just felt like that it was that we existed to serve them. And but that's changed quite a bit. And the new CEO came in, and we've seen a big turnaround in the way that company operates. And it's great to see a great American legacy company also, treat its people in a way that you feel like you're part of the brand and part of the family, and not just a cog in a wheel. But there's a long way to go for that data to be more freely exchanged. Of course, some of that's even on the dealer side. You'd have to, of course, get dealers who are not only on a point of sale system and technologically sophisticated enough to share that information, but you'd also have to be willing to have them be willing to do it. And some of our independent-minded music store owners sometimes are hesitant to share any of their data with their vendor partners.
Yeah, I've never been able to figure that out. I see no need to hide that.
It seems to be like more of an old guard thing than the new guard thing, but I've seen that. So along that same vein, if you were to just make a suggestion of something that you'd like to see more stores doing, what's something do you think more music retailers could be doing that would help their businesses run better, more successfully, more profitably?
Well, I think to along those lines, just make sure that their inventory is accurate, that they are, I think that the mechanism is there to report the sales history to the manufacturers. I just think we haven't connected the dots. And I do think a lot of the onus is on the retailer to make those hooks available. And again, with this new version of TriTech, I mean, as we said, they have a fairly healthy share of the independent music dealer market. Mm-hmm. The hooks exist to present that data to the manufacturers. I just think it's a matter of getting the right people in the room to connect those dots, and then the burden is then on the manufacturer to analyze that data and perfect their supply chain.
Yeah. Well, I'm all for it. If there's anything I can do to help any of those people, you let me know and I'll have someone do it. Who in our industry has been someone that you either admire or they've been a mentor or helped you significantly? Does anyone stand out?
There are so many. It's funny, before I really figured out what this industry was about, it took me about 5 years. I listened to the people sort of close to home, and a lot of those people were not the right people to listen to. We joined a share group in 2001, and that really opened my eyes to what we could do as a business and how we could grow and manage our business better. So I would say all the people in the share group have been mentors to some degree. People like George Hines, a really smart guy, loves analytics, loves to measure. Alan Greenberg, the former CFO of Music and Arts, and I have developed a pretty close friendship. Alan Friedman, another one who, loves financials and math. Just people who get it, and
yeah, that's a great list of folks to be able to count as friends and mentors for sure. So tell me, thinking ahead for Menchey and the next year, what do you prognosticate? What do you think the next 12 months roughly is going to look like, 12 to 18 months?
It's so much easier to answer the 3 and the 10 year time horizon.
I know.
Had you asked me 10 weeks ago,
because most people up until all this happened, the year question was always easy for them, but 3 and 10 years were like, I don't know. Now everyone's like, I'll take the 10 year.
I really don't know. I mean, I honestly think looking at current year business, it's not awful. I mean, we talked about, obviously when our stores aren't open, our sales drop. In fact, we've had some of our revenues have gone to zero over the last 8 weeks. But I do think some of that will come back, and I have to believe some of the repair business will come back. My guess is some of the piano business will come back. I think the real question mark is what happens in the fall and how badly we take a beating on the back-to-school season, because that obviously, and here we are at May 13th, that impacts significantly what happens between September and next May. So it really is, it's a question mark. And I think it should be a question mark for all of us. It's, for the first time ever, it really isn't a competitive issue. It's a market issue, and we're all in the entire market together. 5 years, much easier to forecast. I mean, I certainly think we'll still be here and still be strong and continuing our mission to really just fill in all the gaps we have in our footprint. Our footprint's about a 2 to 3 hour radius of Hanover, Pennsylvania. And if you look at all those different markets, we have different levels of market share. And, so our goal is constantly to look to find the ways to fill in those gaps. And, that's, those have been our marching orders for the last 10 years, and I don't expect they'll continue. But if you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I'd say that it would have been the same answer.
So it could be more stores, more affiliates, just...
Probably not a whole lot of stores. I mean, we're not opposed to opening more stores, but I certainly would not open a store for growth's sake. It has to be it has to fit our mission of essentially, filling in those gaps in the sandbox. There are a couple soft areas, a couple areas where we have strong competitors that we'd like to have stores, but I think as long as we keep that radius intact, we'll just keep trying to gain market.
Yeah. I want to bounce back to something that you said earlier that I forgot to follow up on. You had mentioned that currently you're spending roughly half a day doing general tasks and the work stuff we all have to do. But then you're spending the second half of the day really trying to develop your leaders and the leaders that are in your business. What are some of those things in particular that you're doing to develop those people, and how are you accomplishing that?
So, great question. We, up until about 7 or 8 years ago, we had a management team, but we really didn't have people who were vested in the same thing. And our interests weren't aligned. So we took that management team and selected the people who we really thought would be good strategic leaders. And we've developed a team of 5 people, soon to go to 6, that really are financially aligned with my goals. So I'm one of those 5 or 6, and we meet regularly. We bought the Vern Harnish's book, The Rockefeller Habits. Great book to read for getting your meeting rhythm down with your team. We have daily roundups, which are the people on the leadership team, as well as about 6 or 7 others, and that's a 5 to 10 minute recap on what's happening with each of us that day that involves other people. I don't think people need to know that I'm working on this spreadsheet or that spreadsheet. But if it impacts other people, we like to bring people up to speed. The team then meets weekly, so the 5 or 6 of us meet weekly to talk about more strategic things, bring up operational bottlenecks, etc. And then monthly is a little more meat, and then the quarterly meeting is very high level and strategic. And what we've done at each of those levels is integrated some activities that keep that rhythm going. For example, we have when we will have when we open back up in our weekly meeting, we'll have a book club, and we'll read parts of a book that again will strategically align us in the same direction. And it's amazing after doing this for 5 or 6 years how everybody gets on the same page. We start to share the same way of thinking. In fact, we're now at the point where some of the people on that leadership team feel more strongly about the financial direction of the company than I do, which is kind of it's encouraging.
Yeah, that's great. It's certainly an area that I would like to develop and get better. We've got our leadership team, and the problem is I am the one that does this kind of stuff. I like to talk to people, I like to learn new things, I like to push and improve our business, and I spend a lot of time learning this stuff, and then when I come back I do a really terrible job of selling it to everyone else and explaining it to them, because I've done all this work and I just sort of expect them to take it from me at face value and to be excited about it because I've researched it and I'm ready to go. And it just ends up leading sometimes to a lot of frustration. And they're good people, and they're good workers, and they're smart and capable, but they're not always led as well as they need to be. And so it's definitely an area that I have been working to improve quite a bit over the last year, and sadly still have a ways to go. So last couple of questions here. Tell me about a negative situation that you've experienced in your business career that ultimately had a positive effect in your business, but you don't want to repeat it again.
So it's funny. I answered this question about 2 or 3 months before you asked me to do this podcast. I was listening to Pete Sides as a close friend, and I was listening to his podcast, and my answer is identical to his. And as I was listening to it, I think I was at the gym, and I thought, that is exactly the worst thing that has ever happened to me that I would never want to do again, but ultimately was the best thing that ever happened to me. We lost our banking relationship in 2001. And I think I mentioned our online store that we developed in 2000. So in doing that, again, I really had not defined the goals properly, and we ran up not only a significant 6-figure tab in development costs in building our website, but another significant 6-figure cost in the operational costs to manage this, and it was a disaster. And I took my eye off the ball, and the banker at least waited until after the back-to-school season was over to announce that he was pulling the plug. But that was an awful time. It was right after 9/11, and banks, of course, were not anxious to lend money. It was a really bad time, and we struggled. That quarter was awful. I mean, operationally, we took care of things immediately. I mean, we put all the measures in place to limit overtime and to cut costs and do all the right things. But trying to find a bank in the fourth quarter of 2001 was a real challenge. And I remember sitting at a NAMM show on the sidewalk outside of the convention center on my cell phone with my attorney, reading a forbearance agreement from my bank.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't think I was coming back. I thought that was it. And I got back from NAMM, and a banker from our current bank, he's no longer there, walked in, and he had gotten my name from our attorney. And he and his boss came in that Friday night and made us a deal. And I don't know what felt better, getting the deal or saying goodbye to the old bank, but that there was a due diligence process of about 2 years, 2 months. But when we got there, it was like the whole world changed, and
right.
It made me realize, and I've never forgotten it, how important that banking relationship is. when you're in the school music business. I mean, people talk about the relationships they have with their vendors and how important they are, and they are. But without a solid banking relationship, you can't have any of those other relationships. So we've never taken that relationship for granted. I get regular calls to go out to lunch with other bankers, and I've learned never turn down a lunch with a banker. But I always tell them, our current bank was there when you weren't. So, you're going to have to do something spectacular to win this business.
Yeah.
And, what's happened is in the last almost 20 years, all the personalities from that original relationship have changed. The bank has changed. It's become a much larger bank. I mean, it's been acquired 3 times, but we've still been loyal. And frankly, we've become a great customer. And obviously, we've learned to clean up our balance sheet a lot and to never ever take that relationship for granted. But yeah, that was the worst thing that ever has happened.
Those banking relationships are important for any business, of course, but gosh, for a school music dealer, the bank is, I mean, that's their partner, I mean, we're always running into situations where we're needing some financing, or we're, trying to finance the capital outlay for rental inventory, or there's just always something that's going on. It's very hard business to cash flow in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And that relationship is paramount. And you're right, you get a change in a loan officer at a bank, and all of a sudden you could fall out of favor with them pretty quickly.
Yep, that's all it takes. You're always one banking relationship manager away from a crisis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well said, even though it's sad. So final question is, if you could send a message to yourself 10 years ago, what would you tell the younger you? So it's 2010. 2010 Joel Menchey.
So I just explained the banking crisis that we went through 19 years ago. And that really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And I became much more conservative and had a lot more trouble taking risks. And that has lasted up until right about now. I mean, I'm just now probably 17 years later, starting to get more comfortable taking greater risks. I think what I would have told myself 10 years ago was, it's now time to start taking some risks. You took care of your problems years ago, and it's now time to start becoming a little more confident and taking risks that frankly could grow the business.
Have you listened to the episode with Gerson Rosenblum?
Oh, yes.
Great, definitely episode. Yeah, probably my number 1 episode, and maybe because like you, I've been in that same boat. I think, I grew our business much the way that you grew yours. It's not necessarily from, on my end, it's not really necessarily because of, a great vision or keen insight or incredible intellect. It's mainly just my incredible good looks and physique. Just built it off of this body is what I've done. But it's been a lot of trial and error. Honestly, it's been a lot of gut feelings and instincts and pursuing things, and more things that work out that don't. And sometimes things don't work out, but some of the things that do work out end up being home runs, and the stuff that doesn't work out ends up not being too bad. But then you get a string of failures together, which will happen probably to anyone over a career. And all of a sudden you can just kind of lose that Midas touch, and you just start to pull everything back in. And of course, with me, it was at the same time about, we were kind of expanding our leadership team, bringing in some very smart people that with great accounting background and stuff. And, they tend to be more conservative by nature. And so you think, well, this person went to school and they're very smart, like I should listen to what they say, but they haven't built a business. They don't know what all it takes. And all of a sudden you find yourself you've been overly conservative. You've missed a lot of opportunities, and you're basically in trouble. Like you've got to make a decision. And listening to Gerson's episode was just so eye-opening for me, because he's been one of the people that ever since his business closed, he's been so transparent about that process from the very beginning. He's just a wonderful person, and man, that story has still resonated with me these several months later. I think it's great advice for most of us. You're going to take some setbacks, but you can't let those keep you down. You got to get up and do what made you successful.
Completely agree.
All right. And then what message do you want to tell the you from 10 years from now?
So, in 10 years, I will be in my early 60s. And I guess at that point, I would tell myself that I'd better have a succession plan lined up. And I have no idea. I have a couple ideas what that could look like. But, we've both seen so many business people get to that age and not even have given thought to what their exit strategy would be. And I'm not seriously thinking about it now, but in 10 years, there should probably be something in place. And I think that applies to all of us who are in the business.
Yeah.
I don't want to be 80 years old and still, I love what I do, don't get me wrong, but I think it's not fair to our team and fair to the business for me to continue doing what I'm doing without at least a plan for succession.
Well, if it means anything to you, when I came here a little over 18 years ago, the plan from the beginning was to have me take over the business. And here we are 18 years later, and, where that's still the plan. I'm in a unique position where the person who owns the business has been retired for a really long time. Honestly, now it doesn't even take much from the business. It's just a matter of convenience, but he's in his early 70s and he'd like to kind of move along. And, that process, even back then, we anticipated being a 5 to 10 year process. And because of expansion and just some other things that we kind of got in together, and it probably honestly took us 5 to 10 years to figure out how to work well together. And, but that process can generally take a while. So, it's never too early probably to start it. So I'm just growing my successors. That's what we've done. I've got 2 boys that surely one of them will want to do this. And if not, that's okay. I've reached out to a liquidator. I know how much I can liquidate all this for if I have to.
Yeah. And, I doubt that would be, I can't imagine that would be an option we would consider. This business, it's a great business. It's been around. We're in our 84th year, and it's a strong business, but it's also a fun business. It's fun doing what we do and being such a part of the community.
Yeah.
And I would just hate to lose that. And so it's really important to me to get that step right. And my grandfather was lucky. I don't know if he expected me to come around when I did. But, I have
you being a guitar player, you probably didn't hold out a whole lot of hope.
Exactly. But I don't know where it will end up. I have 2 sons as well. There's certainly the possibility that one or both of them could take an interest, but it's too early to tell.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure one way or another, you'll land on your feet with it and something great will happen, but it's never too early to plan for it for sure.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode. If you'd like help with your business, check out musicretailconsulting.com for articles, resources, and coaching and consulting services. Also, you can subscribe to this podcast so you're aware of future updates and rate and review while you're at it. Thanks for listening.